You've probably already heard about it. Weapons just came out. It's a film by Zach Cregger, who previously directed Barbarian, a very successful film that made a lot of people lock in on his career going forward. Now that his next work is out, there have been some responses, particularly about it having nothing to say, or no central message, or what have you. In fact, this is something that even Zach has spoken about.
There's no overarching lesson in this movie. This is not like I have nothing to say with this movie. I have no pretense of like this is a treatise or anything like that. It's just a diary entry for me.
However, I fundamentally disagree. Let me explain though. Now, I was very excited for Weapons. I loved Barbarian, and I followed Zach Cregger's career since the Whitest Kids You Know days. It's not something I ever really talk about on this channel, but I love horror. I've loved horror my entire life. Movies, TV shows, games, not books because I haven't learned how to read yet, but I love the material that horror tends to cover, our fears, our traumas, the undesirable or ugly parts of humanity, the parts that people don't want to show to others, and because of that, horror often becomes a method of communicating those feelings to a broader audience, with a layer of deniability between the piece and the artist. I didn't get to see Weapons on opening weekend, so all I saw was the immediate response to the movie, and my Twitter timeline was full of, "That's it." Criticisms that the film had nothing to say, and so on and so forth. And I'll be completely honest, this only made me more excited to see the film, hoping that it was just a standard media literacy test that people who jump straight to Twitter to talk about what they have just watched would fail, and well, yeah, I was right. Anyone going online to talk about Weapons having no message is kind of just embarrassing themselves. Maybe you think the message was poorly communicated, or it sucks. That's fine, but the message is definitely there. And I know what you're all thinking. Zach said at the start of this video that he wasn't trying to say anything, but I'll get to that. Let's analyze the statement, Weapons has no message. Well, what does having no message mean? To understand that, we kind of have to single out the word message here and find out what that means in particular. Well, generally when people are referring to a message, they mean an idea, a theme, or a moral that the film is trying to communicate to an audience. Some films go about this directly, for example. The incredibly dark horror movie Click speaks about the importance of even the little moments of life, a message communicated quite clearly to the audience via the premise of the film, a remote that can start and stop time. Some films bury their message a little more implicitly, like the aforementioned Barbarian by the same creator as Weapons. I wouldn't say this movie is the king of subtlety, but it isn't as direct as other films, tackling generational trauma and gender dynamics throughout. I would go as far as to say that whether intentional or not, every film has a message. Art is a massive collection of human experiences, and as a viewer, you're not privy to the experience of the work's creator. Things can be said intentionally, but they can also be said unintentionally, by implanting your own life experiences and feelings into a work. Even if you didn't intend to talk about society, if every single viewer came away with the message that you were, would that be wrong? Well, I wouldn't say so. I would say you unintentionally planted the message in due to being a product of society, and the people who came with that interpretation were studying it also as members of society. Viewers and readers aren't given your life story either, but are placed in a world created by you and let loose with your ideas and messaging.
Well, I think it's up to, I think anyone who has an opinion on it has as valid an opinion as I do. And I'm not just passing the buck when I say that. This show is yours at this point as much as it is ours, and you own it as much as we do. But if you said to me, I don't agree, I think it was arrogance, or I think he wanted to get caught, I wouldn't argue with it. I'd say, well, maybe it is, because you guys own this as much as we do now.
So my point is, everything has a message, even if it's unintentional. As long as you can come up with a valid interpretation for that relies on the material. But also, there's no reason to think that a film or any piece of art can only have one message. What if Weapons doesn't have just one message, but multiple? Yeah, that's right. I'm not just saying Weapons has a message, I'm saying there are quite a few. You can find this all over the internet, in fact. I've seen people come away from this movie with all kinds of different interpretations, and all I can ask is, if Weapons had nothing to say, how would this be possible? Many people walked away from this movie with the idea that it's about school shootings. Alex was clearly bullied by his classmates, went home to his absentee parents, and then coincidentally made all of his classmates disappear, coupled with the very on-the-nose imagery of the giant fucking floating AR-15 in the sky, and the town pointing fingers at each other and ignoring the root causes of these issues. Personally, I find this to be a surface-level reading of the film. However, I can't say that it's not substantiated. While I disagree that Weapons is a movie about school shootings, I understand the steps taken to get there. To me, the giant AR-15 in the sky is simply a red herring and a series of red herrings in this film to distract from the central thesis of the movie. That's also the beauty of interpretive analysis, though. I can see the logic that someone took to get there and think it's valid, while disagreeing with the idea that it's a focus of the movie like so many are saying. If you haven't actually poked around my channel before, it's something I talk about a lot, and it's also something that Zach Cregger agrees with, wanting to leave parts of the film up to personal, subjective interpretation, and not even having his own answer to the giant AR-15 in the sky. Zach feels that half of the fun of this movie is people coming up with their own interpretations, and that circles back to me disagreeing with weapons has no message. I disagree with the audience saying that, but I don't disagree with Zach saying it, because I do believe that he went into making this movie without an express purpose of sending a message or imparting a lesson. Well, I can't really shoot down a valid reading like the school shooting one without offering my own. I've actually had quite a few thoughts about what Weapons is talking about. I think this is something that Weapons touches on, and is a subtle nod towards the 21st century of the breakdown of community. It openly calls into question the many modern failings of our community systems. A general sense of paranoia hanging over the town, much like modern-day America's demise of the community and obsession with safety. It's something many people are pointing out as the years go by, how more and more people are choosing individualism over being part of something bigger than yourself. There are small examples of it here and there, like when Archer goes to the house of a parent and tries to talk to her, but they don't really know each other. Of course, not a significant statement in itself. Maybe you just don't know people. Not that serious. However, I think this loss of community is highlighted, whether intentionally or unintentionally, by how a majority of the footage of these kids disappearing isn't obtained from dash cams or store surveillance or anything like that. Like, no police subpoenas for this footage. It's all from Ring doorbell cameras, the physical embodiments of a low-trust society. Trust is a function of community, and in a hyper-vigilant society where you're constantly inundated with the worst news possible, robberies, kidnappings, true crime documentaries, apps designed to capitalize on low-trust societies, there's no trust to be had, leading to Ring cameras being installed on every house in suburban America. This lack of community, lack of unified understanding, and lack of trust is what we open up the movie with, a complete clusterfuck of an understanding of what happened that day, in the ironic witch hunt of one person before any other solutions could actually be proposed. Despite the complete logistical nightmare, it would be to get 17 different kids to all run out of their home at the same exact time in the middle of the night. Logic was bucked in favor of furthering the low-trust narrative and pinning all the blame on one person. I think this movie has a lot of red herrings about what actually happened to these kids. Did Alex go on a rampage or something because he was bullied? Was this the result of a failing school system? Did Justine actually have something to do with these kids? As we hear that she has what would be considered in a professional school environment an inappropriate relationship with them. Another sign of a low-trust society, even if they are rules that I can understand. Was this the result of a failing community? With a giant AR-15 in the sky, was this the result of school-related violence? Is it the fault of a bad and ineffective police department? We keep getting these scenes about the police doing their best to reassure the town and say that, oh, we're working around the clock to figure this out, but we never actually see that, like, ever. What we do see is Paul going out and busting druggy heads. The film questions throughout its runtime, and the town questions throughout the film's runtime, whose fault is it? I don't know, man, it depends. It's a combination of a breakdown of community, of a low-trust society, of a witch hunt, of a failing school system, of a half-assed failure of a police department. And while everyone is out fighting each other and looking for someone to blame, they miss the obvious. When a lot of people think about abuse or violence towards children, people think of random acts of violence or extreme kidnappings, but that's almost never how it actually plays out. Where it almost always stems from is from within the family, and that is where Gladys enters the narrative. Gladys is, allegedly, a family member, and that is most often where situations like this end up coming from. But I think Gladys represents, like, so many things. It's kind of difficult to just say that she's an analogy for an abusive family member. What's interesting about Gladys, or the witch if you want to call her that, is that she's so much older than the rest of the cast coming into this movie and quite literally sucks the life out of the people she encounters. This could also point to something more in favor of the ineffective systems read, because Gladys represents the generational gap between our cast. In a nation that is losing its sense of community in favor of individualism, people like a Gladys are so far separated from how the country is or how their communities are. Talking about how it was in my day, bringing up fucking consumption. Though Gladys doesn't actually do much of this explicitly, the attitude towards older Americans and their regressive ideas, coupled with a different life experience entirely, leads to the perception of boomers as a concept as a parasite upon the world. Living in a modern-day gerontocracy, as people who won't live to see the consequences of their actions rule this nation as kings and doom the coming generations to untold horrors. There is also something to be said about how what does remain of our communities has us being constantly turned against each other, something Gladys literally does throughout this film, weaponizing the children to turn people against each other, turning the police force against the people they were supposed to protect, having everyone in the town suspect the teacher because, teachers are kind of narrativized to be the enemies right now in some parts of the country, taking struggling addicts and making them out to be your enemy, or the more on-the-nose implementation, how members of the LGBT or other minority groups are weaponized against their own community. Gladys being equated to a parasite is pretty explicit, as the film is covered head to toe in mentions of parasites, seen in the background or heard in the background. Let's also not ignore how Gladys, representative of this very old generation, coming in and instantly killing the gay couple. These are just a few of the immediate ideas or messages that weapons could be talking about. Our school systems are failing us, our communities are failing us, our police force is ineffectual, the older generation is literally sucking the life out of us or turning us against each other. Just because this movie doesn't tie it all up in a neat little bow or have a solution to the problem of a low-trust society doesn't mean that the film has no message. It just means that it has no answers and maybe doesn't have an exclusive central idea. However, this is also a take that I don't agree with. Weapons does definitely have a very central, personal message. That might have just been a bit too implicit. Let's go back in time to 2007. At home, back when I actually had TV, I'd watch a lot of Nickelodeon or Malcolm in the Middle reruns, but there was also a show that was central to my youth experience, and that would end up massively influencing Weapons. No, rather than influencing it, it directly led to its creation. The Whitest Kids You Know.
It's good to see you. Look at you. You look great.
Thank you.
What do you got there?
This is a gallon of PCP.
Wow!
This show came to life when a bunch of 20-year-olds met in the same area of New York, and those kids would be Trevor Moore, Sam Brown, Darren Trumater, Timmy Williams, and of course our director, Zach Cregger.
All right, well, I'm not sure that I'm comfortable with the catchphrase, "I'm gonna grape you in the mouth."
The group formed a sketch comedy group, and later created a TV show together that actually ran for a surprisingly long time, ending in 2011. Just because the show ended, however, doesn't mean that the group split apart necessarily. They were, of course, actual real-life friends and still continue to work together on the Whitest Kids You Know movie, which at the time of posting is still not out, unfortunately. The troupe formed eternal bonds, one that outlasted the series and continued into the internet age, as WKUK started to pick up steam with the advent of things like TikTok and YouTube Shorts, showing their sketches to a whole new audience. The group returned for Twitch streams, sharing fun personal anecdotes and recounting the stories behind their sketches. Trevor Moore specifically was the founding member of the troupe and, I would argue, became the absolute cornerstone of the group. The crew continued to work on projects together or even separately, with Trevor Moore's music work or his Comedy Central show. Whitest Kids You Know entered a renaissance thanks to the newfound success of short-form and live content, and especially due to the COVID-19 pandemic, which caused Trevor to host the Trevor Moore Quarantine Show, which helped reignite the spark of the group. The Trevor Moore Show, the Quarantine Show, the WKUK Twitch shows to crowdfund their new movie Mars, the group D&D show, the show Newsboys with Trevor and Zach, and many other things that I might not even remember right now. WKUK was back, and with it, we got to see this group of hilarious, talented friends banter with each other. Unfortunately, however, on August 7th, 2021, at around 2:30 in the morning in the middle of the night, Trevor Moore fell from his balcony while drunk and passed away. Just like that, WKUK, which felt like it was kicking into gear to come out of this pandemic stronger than it had been, had lost its light. Speaking personally, I think this might be the only celebrity death that has ever impacted me. As someone who had followed the WKUK guys for so long, to suddenly lose Trevor in the middle of the night was genuinely tragic, and if it's tragic to a guy who watched them growing up and was excited about their return, you can only imagine how badly it must have hit the WKUK guys, who had spent much of their lives working with Trevor. And that is what Weapons is about. It's about Zach Cregger's trauma, his grief, his sadness over the loss of his dear friend that came at around 2 in the morning and just happened out of the blue. Justine sits at the center of conspiracy theories over these lost children, even though she's just as lost and harmed as everyone else is, as people speculated over the loss of Trevor and posted conspiracies about his death. Archer lashes out at those around him, as Zach Cregger puts it, taking his anger and freaking out. Themes of relapse and addiction are also strongly tied to the grief narrative here, with the subplot of Paul and James absolutely stealing the screen. A lot of it due to their slapstick comedy, but also because Paul is a recovering alcoholic who we see bring down his rage on James like a crushing of 1,000 winds. Or things like subtle signs of Marcus indulging himself in sugary treats or junk food, a different form of a vice. From a character that exhibited denial and complacency until the problem literally showed up at his door.
Just about how many hot dogs do you eat a day?
Average per day would be something like, I don't know, 7?
7 hot dogs
7, yeah.
a day.
Is that high?
It's a little high.
Is that bad?
Well, not good.
While watching this, I was pondering what James possibly represents before I realized how actually obvious it was. He is the epitome of addiction, his life dominated by that disease and becoming willing to do anything to sate his addiction, much like the puppets we see throughout the movie, that will stop at nothing to accomplish the goal that the witch put them up to. This theme of addiction also stretches to the last bit of the movie, where Gladys completely takes over Alex's parents, and he's forced to care for them.
I can let this much out of the bag because it's already out. But like the Gladys and Alex chapter to me is just about living with an alcoholic parent. I grew up in an alcoholic household. My dad died of cirrhosis, you know, and it's a terrible thing that comes into a family dynamic, and it changes everything. And so, you know, I had a happy house, and then something came into my house and it turned my dad into a scary person, and I'd go to school and everything's cool, and I'd go home and I'd have a scary house with a scary dad.
Of course, I don't bring up any of this to invalidate prior readings. As mentioned earlier, subjective interpretation is something even Zach desires, but this goes to show that Weapons is a deeply personal movie. It's a movie where Zach got to channel his grief in all these characters, rather than acting out in real life. It's a film where he got to have these characters fight, scream, punch, yell, kick, do drugs, so that he didn't fall into that pit of despair on his own. But because it doesn't push an answer or a solution to take home at the end of the day, people think Weapons says nothing. Weapons isn't saying addiction is bad and here's how to fix it. It's not saying our communities are low trust and falling apart, here's a solution. It's not saying that grief is complex, but here's how you can overcome it. It's showing them as they are, through an artistic lens. It comments on our failing systems, police brutality and police cliques, ineffective school systems, the older generation's role in society, the role of family in a developing life, how people will turn to witch hunts for answers, the difficulty of losing a loved one, addiction, and probably even more things that I haven't uncovered, but it doesn't offer a solution, because that isn't what it's trying to do. The message of Weapons is love, to show how deeply impacted we can be by the loss of a loved one, how quickly life can come and go, how you can lose a piece of yourself at 2:17 in the morning on a random night, and his overall multiple observations, feelings, and thoughts of Zach Cregger. A small but powerful example is the kids doing that specific pose as they run. Zach equated it to something he saw in the past.
And in the script, I think what I wrote, I know, was they run like the way that, it's a terrible image, but that little girl in that famous Vietnamese war photograph with the napalm.
That cements it, though.
Yeah.
It's like the worst image I've ever seen. And,
Yes.
It is.
And it really fucked me up a bit. And so, I don't think, so I think that was in there.
At the start of the film, we're introduced to the events of Weapons by a narrator. The child talks about how everyone disappeared in the middle of the night, and that there were no answers. At the end of the film, all the kids return, some of them with more difficulty than others, like how some of them started talking again, but let's go back to the opening narration. The narrator states, the kids never came back. But that can't be true because we see them return at the end after ripping the witch apart. The kids never really did come back though, because grief never leaves you the same. There is no central lesson to be learned, there is no solution, there is no deeply satisfying answer, and the film just sort of ends. That's because, well, sometimes shit just happens, and realistically, there is no reason for the madness. Even though you might try and search for answers, sometimes people in your life die, and that's that. There is no hidden meaning, even if you want to start a witch hunt to find the reason. Sometimes there is no answer to these things, and Weapons is just a diary page from Zach Cregger. And sometimes at the end of a movie like that, all you can do is cut to black. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, make sure you subscribe for more. You can also check the description down below to become a member, which gives you benefits like early videos, membership badges, and cool custom emotes. You can join the Discord where we talk about ReZero, Kagurabachi, Jujutsu Kaisen, and all kind of stuff. Additionally, you can go to the channel store and pick up some awesome stickers made by our channel artist, so you can carry the power of Graphia with you on your water bottle. That's about it though. Thank you for watching. See ya.